Cool. So hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is session 5 on innovation. We're very pleased to welcome David Hansom, Josh Graham, and Kirthi Thomas to present over the next 3 presentations. But we'll begin with David. So David leads Clyde Co's global procurement and state aid practice. David's practice focuses on advising clients in the public, utility and private sectors on procurement law. He has a wide experience in structuring major public sector works and services projects. He has a particular expertise in large-scale regeneration and infrastructure projects, including competitive dialogue and structuring transactions outside of the relevant regime. He frequently advises on related public law and competition issues in procurement activity, and his work includes advising on public sector trade, funding and investment models across public-private partnerships, private finance too, and other sourcing or joint venture arrangements. In procurement disputes, David works strategically alongside Clyde's market-leading litigation team, and we're very pleased to have him here today and to chair the discussion a bit later. Over to you.
The only way is down, isn't it? From that introduction. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And yes, what follows is you'll notice seamless handover between Josh and Kirthi and myself to talk about a project which all of us are involved in the DLT blockchain space in terms of practical application. I, for my sins, as Leo has outlined, I didn't write that myself, but thank you for it. I'm a procurement lawyer, and I work across the construction and the public infrastructure spaces. What we bring to, I guess, the conference and also to talk about today is to look at some of the legal aspects of smart contracts, to look at some of the issues for lawyers as much as for those on the technology side, with a particular focus on the Weather Ledger project, which you will have seen, many of you will have seen from recent press announcements, is been able to publicise our work with the Digital Catapult through Innovate UK, working alongside EHAB and a number of leading players in the construction sector to look at automation, to look at smart contracting solution around one part of the NEC 3 suite of construction contracts. So NEC is one of the main types of construction contract, very commonly used in the public sector, and essentially what it looks to do is mandate as far as possible core clauses that should apply to every construction contract. And one of those core aspects of the NEC 3 suite, and indeed any construction contract, is to consider how events of delay, so the project being delayed, should be dealt with, whether that's in relation to any extension of time that the contractor should have to be able to complete the contract, or indeed whether or not compensation should be payable by the contractor, or indeed by the authority, where there are certain events that are outside the control of the parties. So what am I going to talk about for the next 17 minutes for those of you timing me? Well, we're going to look at some of the, take a step back from what you've been looking at, I guess, over the last couple of days at this conference. I spoke at last year's conference and party to some great debate about what the future is going to hold. A legal perspective, it's important, I think, just to remember that where we're talking about crypto contracting, there is always a contract and there is always a legally negotiated set of terms and conditions, essentially, that applies to the contractual relationship between the parties. And what we are doing through the Weather Ledger project, but also more broadly, as I'll touch on towards the end of my 20 minutes, we are, as a firm, through what we believe is the first in the market. It's called Clyde Co. It's a in-house tech and legal offering, where we are essentially bringing smart contract solutions, the legal aspects of smart contract solutions to market. So what we don't do, we're pleased to know, we don't get involved in the code and whether or not that works, etc. What we do is we draft the legal parameters for what the execution, what the automated transaction should be, based on what's been agreed between the parties. So this is where the worlds of technology and law collide. More broadly, and we'll talk about this in the discussion piece, I think, we are seeing increasing interest for private blockchain solutions and for automation, whether that's through the Internet of Things or broader artificial learning, across the legal sector, particularly in the insurance market, which is where Clyde Co is kind of best known, I guess, globally, in terms of our insurance work. But what we are seeing is real interest now from clients. What I would say is that COVID-19, Brexit, the end of the transition period coming at the end of this year, the bandwidth, I think, within the construction industry to be able to make substantial financial investments in these new types of technology, and indeed the ability to see how they can be applied to real life scenarios, I think is quite limited. That's because industry is stretched in responding to those two current main issues. And I think government backing for these types of projects, and what we've seen through Weather Ledger, which is, as I've said, a project to explore through a proof of concept how the weather delay clauses in the NEC3 contract can be automated. Without government funding, these things, I don't think simply wouldn't happen, particularly in this marketplace. What we are seeing is a real desire for industry to be involved, but either for resource or simple bandwidth purposes, not being able to take the lead. And this is a great example of where I guess the state, where the research and development funding, which is available in different pots, really is driving it forward. So a smart contract, what is it? Well, going back to 1996, the so-called Ricardian contract, the name person that coined the phrase. Essentially, what a smart contract is an approach which puts the core aspects of a contract, so the obligations of each party, the responsibilities of each party, appropriate provisions on exit, appropriate provisions for payment, into a format which can be expressed through software, and it's as broad as that. I think there's a lot of noise around the term smart contracts. I think there's three aspects to that. One is certain quarters thinking that it will be the end of the legal profession, and I'll come on to talk about why I don't think that's the case in a second. Secondly, because particularly in complex supply chains, we have multiple levels of suppliers, main contractor or prime contractor, and then 2 or 3, 4, 5 or 6 even subcontracts. Anything which can speed up the process of contract management, anything that can speed up the process of project management, is seen as a fantastic sort of easy win. But taking away the layers of paper, the layers of people, and the scope then for things to go wrong in those human interactions. And thirdly, the third reason for the noise is I think that there are a number of areas of contracts which are more easily expressed in software terms and can be automated. And essentially, where we are now in terms of the tech from a legal perspective, and I'm really happy to take questions if you don't agree with me, but I think where we see the global market in smart contracting through our work in Clyde Co and through this project, is that the technology is there to automate a particular transaction through using code. What we're not seeing is technology being able to essentially conduct a risk assessment. So before the transaction takes place through the contract, oftentimes, particularly in a complex construction contract, there will be a need for a human intervention in terms of determining whether or not a particular materiality threshold has been crossed, whether an event is severe enough to justify then automating that transaction. So what we're not seeing yet, and technology I don't think is there yet, is an automation of the whole process of contract drafting in terms of documenting each party's attitude to risk, what they will accept, under what circumstances will certain risks be transferred between the parties. That's where the lawyers come in, and that's why I don't think my profession is in imminent risk of demise, regardless of how smart contracting is picked up. So a number of different ways that smart contracts can be used, and this slide really just sets out some examples of the types of areas where we see a use development opportunity. I think the first, again, in terms of procurement, in terms of supply chain management, the whole piece around how distributed ledger technology and certainly project-specific private blockchain technology can improve compliance. So that's things like real-time monitoring of construction projects, make sure that things are being done as they should be, real-time management of health and safety issues, big issues in the construction market around modern slavery. I was reading an article today that 84% of modern slavery cases in the UK arise in private industry, and the construction industry sadly is not immune from that. Looking at where people have come from, are they being paid properly, are they being paid on time, etc. Crucial, I think, in terms of driving up standards in those spaces. And of course, the ability then through those compliance ledgers to generate automated reports for any number of stakeholders. Next example, quickly, consortium, sort of the shared ledger approach. So this is the sort of private blockchain model. Now there's an interface here with BIM, which is again government-led electronic modelling of a design of a project and project management. BIM is a whole separate kind of conversation, I think, but what we can see is that if the parties have real-time access to relevant information, it speeds up projects, it reduces the risk of delay, it should reduce the cost of delivery of the project. And then the last two, talking about the other sort of big use class areas, particularly insurance or financial services, it's using smart contracts to automate payments, to automate payments to insureds where claims are submitted electronically. It's also looking at, for example, potentially using smart contracts to, for example, automate payments to parties to a joint venture arrangement on the occurrence of a certain event or at the end of a financial year. So what examples are we working on? What are we seeing elsewhere? I mean, I think, you know, we're talking about the weather ledger today, which is very specifically a construction related contract. And there are a myriad of other opportunities within the NEC suite or JCT or FIDIC suites of contracts to be able to automate a part of those through a smart contracting solution. However, it's not, I don't know, obviously today is about the construction world, but I think it is interesting to read across into other examples. So stuff that we're involved in, we see massive interest and huge uptake for example, in the shipping and trade spaces, using smart contracting solutions to automate when data sensors on cargo ships indicate that the ship has arrived at port safely, then payments can be triggered automatically. Equally, where a ship is perhaps navigating through more dangerous waters, insurance premiums can be increased and paid automatically for the duration of that crossing. That reduces cost, obviously, to the counterparties, and it also provides a real-life data source, a real-time data source. There's a lot of talk about, in the construction industry, in particular, the provenance of materials. So, where does that steel come from? Is it steel which has been bought using labour of dubious sources? Is it steel that's been bought through countries dumping steel into particular markets at very low cost? The example that's always used in this context is Weather Ledger, which is, as many of you know, an automated register of the provenance of diamonds and other bespoke or rare goods. It is possible, and we are seeing supply chains building in ways in which smart contracts can be used to guarantee provenance. Conscious of time, how does this work in terms of the Weather Ledger specifically? Well, under an NEC contract, essentially the contractor will be contractually obliged to build a certain work, and the contract will govern the terms that relate to that contract. The NEC suite of contracts has a number of standard provisions in it, as I've said. It also has scope for additional clauses to be added for particular projects. And one aspect of it is where commonly the delivery of the construction site, the delivery of the project is delayed due to adverse weather. And I think if you look across the sort of broader context here of the climate emergency that many local and regional governments around the world have declared or are declaring, the extremes of weather that perhaps we're starting to see, or at least starting to document more now, mean that these types of clauses are a ripe area for disputes between the parties in terms of what the consequences of that adverse weather should be, in terms of compensation to the contractor, in terms of claims for delay. So essentially what you have under most models is the contractor on the left-hand side, the guarantor if there is one, a mechanism by which weather readings are captured, whether it's drones or it's drawing on data from Met Office or other sources. There may well be named storms or named events within the smart contract, or types of storms of certain thresholds. Those are then those provisions are then agreed between the parties, and then a code is produced, which will essentially generate an automated payment or an automated notification, or both, in the event that the weather readings exceed what is set for a set period of time. And then on this example, that then feeds through to the insurance company, and then the insurance payments, etc., are assessed in the usual way. So we talk about smart clauses. We talk about essentially delivery of clauses which can be dropped into existing contracts. And essentially what they do is they connect contracts to external systems through real-time, providing real-time visibility, and essentially look at two areas. Look at payments. So in the Weather Ledger example I touched on, it may well be that there are other use cases for smart clauses, and there's examples on this slide. And in the event of X, Y will happen, and then the Y is the automation. And then I think the other half of it then is looking at, for example, data-driven performance, and the extent to which we're using data, and through Clyde Co's data analytics lab, what we're starting to do is to be able to capture claims data, capture information about previous cases or cases in dispute generally, to help to establish trends through AI-led technology. So this is all about, as I say on this slide, connected contracting. Essentially, any type of contract can be digitized in whole or part. The key is to identify the areas where the transaction can take place automatically. I think the key area is automation of payments and or other operations under the contract. And that can take in data sources from not just the parties to the contract, but from other external validated sources as well. And as I've touched on, I'm conscious of time, but we then look at how automation can lead to payments and to an audit trail. So in the last 2 minutes or minute and a half, it was simply to say that through our work with all the partners through the Digital Catapult funded Weather Ledger project, we are excited about the opportunities that can be created through it. We also see a myriad of other potential use cases across the construction industry. With that, Leo, I will hand back to you.